Hello, I'm Max Pogonowski, and if there's one thing you'll learn about me from this presentation, it's that I can be a stubborn perfectionist and a giant nerd, although looking around the room, most of you already know that. This is a talk about optimization, as you can probably tell from the subtitle, and in a lot of cases you won't need to do what I did, but I think it's worth knowing about how these systems work. There are some interesting quirks in them. You'll hear me say Valkey and Redis interchangeably because they're basically the same thing. Valkey is a fork of the Redis project that AWS created in response to Redis moving away from an open source model. But that's the subject for another talk. So I'm very grateful to the DrupalSouth committee for giving me this opportunity to take you through a journey deep into the bowels of the kingdom of Redis, otherwise known as the Redis module. And in the blurb for this session, I promised a story. So, welcome to Cache Quest. If you're not in the mood to get nerdy today, now is your chance to escape. I promise you I won't be offended. Otherwise, please make sure you're somewhere you can comfortably see the screen, because that's where the story is translated back into plain English. Okay, I was working in government at the time of these events. I was, in fact, stewarding the mighty bastion of www.nsw.gov.au. Some of you might know it as the 1CX project. It has over 600 lords and ladies of the court, supported by some 50,000 subjects, not to mention the construction materials numbering in the hundreds of thousands or millions if you include revisions. And monitoring of the website consistently reported an 80% cache hit rate from Valkey. So 4 out of 5 citizens were I don't know. My imagination gave out on this one. Who thinks that's good? 80%. Raise your hand. All right. Not good enough? Too good to be true? I thought it was pretty good. And back to the story. So the fiefdom wasn't without its problems. Every now and then there would be a small uprising and a courtier would have to do some more work. That is, an editor would lose their content and have to do it again, which I'm sure you'll all agree is incredibly frustrating. So I went digging with SPX looking for reasons for these timeouts, and I found pages that made over 4,000 database calls, mainly because there were like 100 accordions on the page. So obviously we went about fixing the application problems as well, but that's a separate problem. That's the context we're working in. It is a big complex site, lots of moving parts, gigantic, the biggest I've ever worked on at least. And so every story about castles needs a big bad, a monster to quell, to stop it from terrorizing the land, making us the hero, right? What do you think it is in this story? Any ideas? Shout it out. It's Russia. Who's ever run a cache clear on prod and immediately regretted their life choices? Yeah. It's not great practice to use it for anything other than deployments, of course, but sometimes you just gotta. And let me tell you, I learned to fear that beast. I just watch all the metrics spike. The auto-scaling would kick in, and in a minute or 3 it would be fine, but in that time I knew there was going to be a heap of lost work for all the editors, and the complaints would start coming through the door. It happened almost every time. Now I think looking around the room that everybody here probably knows how a cache miss works. I don't think I need to explain the data flow, but the really key part here that we're going to be talking about is that a cache miss is quick. The cache goes, nope, I don't have that, and that's instant, or as close to it as you can get. With the Redis module, things work a little bit differently. When you do a drush cache clear or any kind of full cache clear, the Redis module stores a timestamp. And when you request a cache entry, Redis dutifully returns the entire cache entry that it had from before the cache clear. And then Drupal compares the timestamp of that cache entry with the the timestamp of the cache clear, and if the entry is too old, it discards it. I had pages that were doing this over 4,000 times. and therefore discarding over 4,000 transferred entries. And so Redis is fast, but it's not instant, and especially if it's a managed service, it's across network boundaries, right? And so we were transferring megabytes and megabytes of data that were just getting discarded and not used. So I was working every angle I could to defeat the dragon, and this was a wastage I could try and address. And what do we do if we want Redis to stop sending all that data? Empty the cache bins, which unfortunately is easier said than done. So I travelled to the capital to see if anyone else was having dragon troubles and what they had done about it, and found a number of other barons petitioning the king to allow the use of a powerful spell called keys. Turns out the king had issued a proclamation just 2 days before I arrived, which said no. If you were quick enough to read the last comment on the previous slide, you would have seen the full answer, which I've paraphrased here, proposing his preferred magic weapon for dealing with dragons. He had a very good reason to forbid the use of keys. It blocks all other operations, and it can take a very long time to complete if you have enough data. King for a reason. I have a great deal of respect for Sasha. He's shaped a huge portion of Drupal, and if you spend any time at all in the issue queue, whether that's core or contrib, you'll see him providing expertise and guidance on any number of topics. So his word is not necessarily gospel, but he does know what he's talking about. So, armed with the king's proclamation, I went down to the armory to look for this magic weapon, or any others that might do the job and do it at lightning speed. I picked up Flush All and gave it a swing. It was quick, but on a copy of my site with all the data intact, it did take a few seconds to run, and it blocked all activity for that time. It felt like a good fit, but not quite good enough for my needs because it was clearing all of the new cache entries that were coming in as a result of the cache clear. Wait, sorry, no, that was a different. This one didn't do that because it was a blocker. Never mind. I found a spell that looked a lot like the keys one proposed by the other stewards. Scan is non-blocking, delete is non-blocking. But it takes about half an hour to run on the site I was testing it on. So that was then deleting all the keys that were coming in after the cache clear. There was another version of the king's suggested weapon, so an asynchronous flush, but it was even slower than Flush All. It was maybe a couple of minutes, so I discarded that too. And I was getting pretty frustrated by this point. I don't give up easily, but I was getting pretty close. I had one thing left that I could try. I traipsed up the stairs of the tallest tower in the capital to consult the wizard who lives there. By which I mean I sent a Slack message to my mate Nick, the operations lead at Skipper, who's the website's hosting partner. We talked about it off and on for a while, and then, just like a wizard, he went off to a large set of shelves to retrieve a scroll. He unrolled it in front of me and showed me the writing upon it. A cache prefix. It was so obvious I nearly died of embarrassment damage. If you change the keys you're asking for, Valkey can't send you stale content or stale data because there isn't any at that key yet. I mean, the reason they're using a timestamp in the first place is so that you can differentiate, but the timestamp was in the wrong spot, in my opinion. So I had an answer. Great. All I had to do was create a spell using that scroll, which was laughably simple. Just store the cache prefix in state, and when the dragon attacks, or you run drushcr, get the current cache prefix, schedule it for destruction, remember I'm a perfectionist, and then generate a new cache prefix and overwrite the old one in state. I affixed my seal to the spell, tied it with a silk ribbon, and presented it to the king, who sent me packing. I hadn't considered where state is stored. In the cache. Oops. I briefly flirted with the idea of just putting the cache prefix in memory, but quickly realized that has a fatal flaw, which is anybody. Docker containers or majors don't share memory. Yeah, and we have at least 8 on duty at any one time, so if you put it in memory in one container, all the others won't know about it. back to the drawing board again. I needed a single shared point of reference, and then it dawned on me that private file storage is exactly that. I just had to put the cache prefix value in a file, so I set that up. And what do we think happened to the cache hit rate, the one that was consistently 80% before? Any ideas? Yes. Yes, it went down. There was no longer a disconnect between what Redis considered a cache hit and what Drupal considered a cache hit. So we started seeing a huge dip after the cache clear, and then a quick recovery in the cache hit rate. And last I saw it under heavy use, the site was getting around 60% of cache hits on Redis. And that's not a good cache hit rate, but it's a good thing that we have that metric now, because that gives the team ammunition that they can use to go, okay, here, look at this. We need to get some time and budget to actually spend some time on the application to fix the underlying problems. Why is it not caching these things properly? Now, part of it is the fact that there's just 600 editors using it all the time, and so and every time you save a form, there's very little value in the cache because it's creating new paragraphs and they're not in the cache. So that did slay the dragon. Even though the cache hit rate went down, the complaints reduced. And anecdotally, at least, there were fewer instances of lost work. There's a few people in the room who can probably give a more up-to-date version of that, because I'm not at DCS anymore. It was happening during a period of many performance improvements, and I don't think I could have gathered hard data on the impact if I tried, but our stakeholders were happier, and that's according to the reports I was receiving. We're nearly at the end. Well, that is the end, almost. I don't see any junior developers in here. I think I know all of your faces, pretty much, but I'm going to go through these anyway because I wrote them down. If I'm preaching to the choir, please give yourself a pat on the back. This one should be a no-brainer, but just in case, don't blindly trust other people's work. I mean, Drupal's strength is the amount of community work that we put into it, but make sure you understand what a patch is doing before you use it, because I could have done untold damage to the site's reputation if I'd used the keys method and it somehow got through to prod. Which it might well have, because a lot of the lower environments don't have as much data in them, and then we could have got through to prod, run a cache clear, and then the whole thing crashes and burns, and that would have been horrible. Secondly, talk to your SMEs. If you're doing something that involves ops and you have an ops wizard, talk to them. Same for SEO, UX, front end, back end, anything that you even have full proficiency in. Maybe check in with the rubber ducky first, but if that doesn't work, your team, your colleagues, your service partners are there to support you. Measure what's actually happening. Don't automatically trust your monitoring. If something feels off, but there are no immediate effects or outages, it's still worth investigating. Which brings me to, in a world of AI where lines of code are quickly becoming a cheap commodity, your instincts will be one of your most valuable assets. In this instance, my instincts were telling me to persist. I can't tell you why I felt like there was a problem with Redis for our site, but the feeling just would not go away. Maybe it was the 80% hit rate that just never changed. Anyway, I kept coming back to it because something felt off. Ask Nick, I'm willing to bet he muttered, "Just leave it!" to himself more than once. But eventually my instincts led me to victory, and yours will do the same for you. Thank you for indulging this incredibly nerdy story. I hope you had fun. Do I need to go back and translate any of that? Probably not. We've got any questions? I've got something else I can show you that I worked on the code day. If I can figure out how to turn off display extension. There we go. Main display. Good. Wait. No. Now I can't see what I'm doing over here. Oh well, this'll do. Who has ever seen this in relation to a menu? Yeah. On prod, Yeah, because you go to edit your main navigation, which your client's using for their entire infrastructure, IA, you know what I mean. And eventually they add one too many menu items and there's no more memory left. A few years ago I made a JavaScript-based Ajax loading thing for a client out of a proprietary system, and I've wanted for a very long time to do it as pure.js for Drupal core, I'm hoping. Fingers crossed for Drupal core. I'm actually now one of the subsystem maintainers for Menu UI. So on Tuesday I built this thanks to AI, and it loads lightning fast, and it supports drag and drop between layers. This, it's not perfect yet, it's just a proof of concept, but it uses HTMX. You can, if you've got 5,000, this is running with 15,000 menu items, by the way, right now, which obviously your site probably is not going to need, but that's the test bed. And if you can't find what you're looking for, you can find it by searching for a keyword and just take it. So, bonus content. I'm really there we go. I'm really hoping to get that into core as an experimental module fairly soon. Yeah. Oh, watch this space. Taxonomy term editor? You sure? Why not? All right. Thanks, everyone. Open sourcing that I'm going to make that an issue. I was talking to XJM last night. She said to make it a major issue on the core issue queue. So it's only not there yet because I want to read everything that Claude wrote for me before putting it under public scrutiny. Sorry? Thanks. Yeah. I almost made it like a crowd-based RPG. If you've ever been to like Critical 20 or whatever it is, roll. But I ran out of time and thought that maybe that was a step too far.